So, students, I welcome you back to our lectures. Today will be a quite an interesting discussion on something out of the the usual way of things. As in, we will be discussing something which is known as horsepower. Okay, so the word itself is quite familiar. You might have heard this term while studying physics at class 9, 10th, 11th, 12th levels, as well as you must have heard these words if you have a background in some if you have an industrial background, or maybe you use machines, or you spend some times with the machines, you have that interest in the working of machines and generators and motors and other mechanical stuff. Okay, so the topic here precisely will be horsepower, the history behind the popular power term. Okay, so this horsepower, as the name itself suggests, is constituting basically two different words put together. So it is like horse and then power. So power word, you all understand, it is the rate of consumption of energy, is one way of putting the word power. And the other idea of the word power is the rate of getting the work done. Okay, so if you want to put power in perspective in terms of the formula, you can say that power is E upon T, where E is the energy spent and T is the time in which it is spent. Or you can also use the formula work done upon time. So how much work is being done in what time. Okay, so that is the rough idea behind the general power formula. Okay, now when the term horsepower comes, so what essentially happens here is that we discuss power usually during our lectures, and during study we study the power term, and then we study the units of power. Okay, so the unit of power, the first thing that comes to your mind is watt. Okay, so written with a capital W, that is the SI unit of power. Okay, so when somebody asks you what is the SI unit of power, you say that watt is the SI unit of power. Now here we are speaking in general about power. Now this power can may be electrical power, this may be mechanical power, this may be a number of things, but when it comes to horsepower, it will be more discretely associated with mechanical aspect of energy or power. Okay, so this is used mainly in mechanical engineering. Okay, or you can say that it is used with regards to machines. Okay, so wherever you have machines, so where do you have machines? You have machines in factories, you have machines in industries. So whenever, and what are these machines basically? These machines are basically run by electricity, run on electricity. So you have you have motors, you have generators, you have machines like this. Okay, so horsepower no doubt is a unit of power, essentially mechanical power. Okay, but in what way is it different from our SI unit and the other units that you have? So let's understand that, because when I told you that the history of this word horsepower has to be understood, basically what I meant here was that how has this word horse been associated with the word power? So you see, let us go back to what we were discussing. Power has the SI unit as watt, but along with what you do use kilowatt also. Okay, then you also use megawatt. Okay, so when you're talking in terms of electrical terms, electrical power, you use these terms. Okay, but when it is more associated with mechanical power, then you use, most of the times you use the term horsepower. Okay, so if watt is the SI unit of power, then what is horsepower? What kind of a unit is horsepower? Just like we are saying that capital W is a unit of power. So this unit comes under the system of SI, which is System International. Okay, so what is the SI unit of power? Horsepower is the FPS unit. FPS unit of power. Okay, now what is this SPF unit? You might have you might have studied while discussing at the ninth level. You must have studied those 3 4 different systems of units that are prevailing all over the world. So you see, you have SI system, you have FPS system, you have CGS system. So these were the different systems of units used across the world. So for example, when I say FPS system, so what does this F, P and S mean? F means foot, P means pound, and S means seconds. Okay, so when we talk in terms of length, mass and time, these are the basic physical quantities that we have. So foot is the unit of measurement of length in the FPS system. Okay, similarly, if you want to measure length in CGS system, you will use centimeters. If you want to measure the length of a particular thing in SI system, you will use meters. Okay, so just like you have CGS system, you have SI system, similarly you have the FPS system, used basically by the Britishers. Okay, so FPS, foot, pound and seconds. Okay, now the topic here is that horsepower is the unit of power. Okay, so this unit comes under which category of units? Does this come under SI? No, it comes under the FPS unit. Now coming back quickly to the historical aspect of this horsepower. So how did this horsepower come into play? So you see, earlier, way back, even before James Watt, you see, even before the times of James Watt, who actually discovered the steam engine, and he had performed a number of experiments based on generating power. Okay, so even before his time, what used to happen? People used to, because we did not have any units at that time, we did not have any proper way of measuring and allotting different units to power and energy. So basically what people used to do was, they used to use horses. Okay, and their estimated strength in pulling or carrying loads. Okay, so for example, if you compare two horses, let's say for example, one horse does more work with respect to time, whereas the other one does not do so. Okay, so there were no units in which to associate those values. So what people used to do was, they used to express it in terms of horsepower. Okay, so this was a term basically. Later on it became a unit, naturally, but earlier it was not a unit. It was a general term that people at that time used to use, just in order to compare the different powers developed by the horses. Okay, so how fast a horse can travel, or how fast a horse can carry a load, how quickly can it carry a load. Okay, so all these aspects, they use the term horsepower. Okay, now what did James Watt observe? When James Watt was actually working with this aspect of generating power in the steam engine and all, so he observed that after obviously a number of experiments, he observed that roughly around 22,000 pounds, roughly around 22,000 pounds of force was getting generated per foot in 1 minute. Now let us understand what this means. You see, the horse's hooves, they were pounding continuously on the ground, and they were carrying loads. Okay, so after observation through a number of days and a number of ways in which to carry the load with the help of the horses, it was observed by James Watt that usually around 22,000 pounds. Now pound here literally is a unit used to measure mass. Okay, but then we will use, assuming that it is multiplied by gravity and all that, we will convert this into force. So we will assume that it is like 22,000 pounds of force which was being generated in an area of 1 foot in 1 minute. Okay, so this was the observation that most of the horses, strong horses, were giving at that time. So this was what James Watt was already witnessing, but he wanted this value to increase to how much? So he wanted this value to increase to, let's say, 33,000 pounds. 33,000 pounds per foot in 1 minute. Okay, so essentially this was what was already available, and he wanted to increase it to this. Okay, so this basically was these three terms, these three units, they were basically being used, these three terms were being used to analyze the power developed by the horses. Okay, so this increase was what was James Watt working upon. Okay, so from 22,000 he wanted it to increase to 33,000 pounds. Okay, so he performed a number of different experiments later on, and he probably succeeded in them also, and he developed the steam engine. But then it was from this concept earlier on that this particular 33,000 pounds per foot per minute became so popular that it became a standard. Okay, so it was like it was this 33,000 pounds. By the way, pound is written as small l small b in terms of the units. So this much pound per foot per minute. Okay, so he wanted this particular value to be achieved, and he was this particular value became so popular at that time, then this actually came to be called as a horsepower. Okay, this came to be called as 1 horsepower. Okay, which we now obviously use capital H and capital P to denote. Okay, so 1 horsepower, we all know that it is equal to 746 watt. This is what we usually mug up, and what we usually learn without actually having to know the history behind this particular term H dot P. What is H dot P, and how did it come across? How did we develop this? If watt is a unit of power, horsepower is also a unit of power. So what is the difference between them? If W, which is capital W, which means watt, is the SI unit of power, then what is this HP? So now we know that HP is the FPS unit of power, and its origin dates back to much before James Watt, where horses were being analyzed, their strengths was being analyzed to actually come across different values of powers. Okay, so it was this 33,000 pounds per foot per minute which was actually made a standard value, and it was expressed in terms of horsepower. Okay, so when somebody said in earlier times, when somebody said 1 horsepower, what it usually meant was developing a force of 33,000 pounds per foot per minute. Now when you compare when you bring this down in terms of second, now this is like per minute. So if you want to convert this into let's say seconds, what you will essentially have to do is 33,000 pound per foot, and if you write second here, naturally 1 minute has 60 seconds, so you will have to divide this by 60. So this 0 and this 0 will get cancelled, and you will have 6 5s are 30 and 6 5s are 30, and then this 0. So essentially this value over here boils down to 550 pounds per foot per second. Okay, so it was this that was called a horsepower. Okay, which we naturally, this is the relationship between horsepower and this pound, foot and second. But if you use our normal terminology of using the SI system, we all know that 1 horsepower is equal to 746 watt. Okay, so this watt usually, you use it in electrical terms also, you use it in mechanical terms also, but horsepower is more related to the mechanical aspect of power. Okay, so I hope you have understood the historical aspect of horsepower, from where did it actually come. So this horsepower has actually literally come from the horses. Okay, and that is the reason why it is still carrying the name horsepower. Okay, so we'll continue making such videos where I'll give you some interesting information. Hope it helps and hope it increases your knowledge.